Hello, everybody. I'm Kirsten Hotelling-Zona. I'm a professor and a certified life coach and owner of Full Potential Coaching. And I am coming on here tonight to talk to you about self-sabotage and self-love and the relationship between the two of them. In a couple of weeks, I will be hosting a women's retreat here in Central Illinois. And over the course of the next week, I'll be making short videos like this one in which I offer a glimpse into some of the teachings that I'll be offering and diving deep into at the women's retreat. So tonight I'd like to talk to you about self-sabotage, what I mean by self-sabotage, and how self-sabotage is related to self-love. So first of all, what do I mean by self-sabotage? In particular, I'm talking about those habits or those patterns of behavior that you know don't serve you, but that you cannot seem for the life of you to outrun or to break for good. Over drinking, overeating, compulsive shopping, phone or device addiction, scrolling mindlessly through Facebook or Instagram, overworking. These are just some of the habits of self-sabotage that my clients come to me with feeling defeated by. And it's at this time of year when we are encouraged from so many corners to be setting new intentions and new goals and new visions for not only the new year, but now the new decade, that we come face to face with these old habits. And maybe we're compelled to set yet another goal to overcome them for good this time. And yet after 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe 5 or 6 weeks at the most, back we've slid once again. And maybe you've tried to do this not only last year, but the year before, and the year before that, and maybe even the year before that. So that now, as you look at the new year ahead, you're feeling defeated by the very idea of setting intentions for yourself, afraid that you will never outrun these self-sabotaging habits, at a loss, hopeless in the face of them. The very first teaching that I want to offer you and that I will dive deep into at this retreat is this. Your habits of self-sabotage are not something you partake of because you in fact hate yourself. Your habit of self-sabotage, this particular habit or pattern that's so hard for you to outrun or break, was seeded long ago by a thought, by a mindset that's probably become very subconscious or even unconscious to you now, that at one point served you. That is to say, the very seed behind the self-sabotaging habit you practice now began as an act of self-love, probably in your childhood or in your youth. But your self-sabotaging habit, even a full-blown addiction, was originally a savvy, self-preserving response to some pain, and it worked. The problem is that now, over the years, this habit is something you've outgrown. The way in which this habit allows you to buffer, to distract, to avoid, to numb, to check out, no longer serves you. At one point it did, but it no longer does. And so the costs of this habit outweigh the benefits. This is where we must begin, with the understanding that any self-sabotaging habit isn't in fact a conscious act of self-sabotage. It started as an act of self-love. From there, I offer my teaching number 2, which is this. Self-sabotage is not that thing. So let's think of your habit, okay? I want you to identify right now, what is that habit, that pattern that you just can't seem to outrun? Maybe it's a pattern of relating to somebody in relationship. Maybe it's the way you show up in your relationships, a pattern of avoidance, a pattern of ambivalence. Maybe it's a pattern of overconsumption, whether food, alcohol, or material objects. There's all kinds of ways in which our self-sabotaging habits manifest. So I want you to identify the one that feels most doggedly intractable to you Keep it in your mind's eye right now. And I want to say to you that that habit is not, in fact, the thing that you need to exile or resist or otherwise somehow work yourself around in order to access and practice genuine self-love. And in another video, I'll talk about what I mean by self-love, because there's a lot I don't mean about it. Okay? So self-sabotaging habit is not, in fact, the impediment to self-love. Rather, your self-sabotaging habit, that pattern you can't seem for the life of you to break, is precisely the gateway. It is the gateway to a practice of genuine self-love. Your self-sabotaging habit is precisely the gateway to seeing, to revealing, to feeling the fullness of who you are, ushering yourself into wholeness. Self-love is not anathema to, is not opposite to your self-sabotaging habit. Self-sabotaging habits are in fact not what we love ourselves despite, but your self-sabotaging habit is what you get to look squarely in the eye and meet with compassion. That is the bedrock of sustainable, genuine, thriving self-love. So, those are the first two principles around which my entire teaching about self-sabotage, as in fact a gateway to self-love, revolve around. Let me repeat. Self-sabotage and self-love are not opposites that exist as polar extremes. In order to practice and achieve a deep feeling of inner peace, wholeness, and self-presence, we don't do so at the expense of, by resisting, by working around our self-sabotaging habits. We invite those habits right to the table. We look them squarely in the eye and we meet them not with resistance, but compassion. Step number one. So if this process piques your interest, if anything I've said makes you feel like this retreat might be something you'd like to attend, click on the link below where you can find out everything you need to find out about the day. It's going to be an amazing day. If you live in or near Central Illinois, or if you can travel to us in a couple of weeks, I would love to see you there. Have a great night.